Thank you. So hello everybody, I'm Sylvaine Mercuri Chapuis. So I am professor in France at the Catholic University of Lyon. And in this university there is a business school that's called SDS, Lyon Business School. And actually I had my PhD in the National University in Lyon, and after 4 years, I decided to stay at the Catholic University. So it's an hybrid organization because it's a business school within a university. So, I make research. I teach also. So I have different aspects in my teaching. It's strategic management, human resource management, and also foresight. And I try to deliver some courses and experimentation for students to experiment foresight with the French overview of what it is. And I use the work of Philippe Durance and Michel Godet. And I have also other connection with Fabrice Roublat, or this professor in France. So today my paper is about strategic foresight to open on responsible management. So my focus is on CSR, so corporate social responsibility, and using foresight for developing responsible management. So I will have an intellectual process. So I give you the context, the methodology I use, and what are the first results I have from my qualitative research, and some discussion, etc., to improve the result and maybe the methodology or the use of research. So today the context is we have in business a large number of stakeholders. And we have also this question of CSR, that is, Jonas said that we have to, the dynamic man has to preserve the integrity of his word against the abuse of his power. So sometimes when I start my courses, I say to my students that you can have strategic foresight without having any value, responsible value. It's possible to make foresight for no value at all, so it depends, and it's quite important to know why you do foresight and for whom. And also the context, it's about time, and when you analyze behavior, strategic behavior, the relationship, you have to analyze the process over time, or the relation or the power dispatch from one day to another day, etc. So when we work in organizations, so Jean-Pascal Gon and his colleague Moon, when they discuss about CSR, corporate social responsibility, they say that it's a question of power relation, and it's also a question of stakeholder analysis. And from the past, if you listen to Michael Porter, he had a talk maybe last Monday, and he said that today we need to have a stakeholder optimization. So we need to make priorities because it's maybe too long, too expensive to meet all the expectations of the stakeholder. So actually, we can say maybe the common good, is it only a discourse? Because power is still present in organization, in company, and stakeholder structure the strategy. So it's quite an interesting topic to debate. And also, when we look at Gaston Berger, when he discusses strategies for foresight, he says, see far, see broad, see together, and focus also your thinking about weak signal from stakeholder. And if you compare that with the resource theory of Penrose, actually you can say that stakeholder are a source of resources for company to have new practices, to have innovation, etc. So it's weak signal in the environment can give new idea for new strategy, new creation, and to improve the responsible management. So it's a consensus, a long-lasting consensus to implement a practice. And right now, it's not so easy to work with a stakeholder in a common good. So here I had some analysis of scenario planning. It's one Foresight exercise. And when you look at scenario planning, we notice that the strategic tools are very different. You can use a SWOT matrix, 5-porter forces, visioning, balanced scores. You are many strategic tools used when you do scenario planning to scan your environment. It's quite beneficial for organization because you have credibility. We speak about legitimation, knowledge, reputation, kind of criticism also, engagement. So network, responsibility, so many benefit for organization to Foresight. And about risk, it's assessment, managing risk, lowering them, and deal with uncertainty. So when you refer to your relation to your stakeholder, it's a kind of engagement. Also a question of multiplication, because when you start to discuss with one stakeholder, you see another stakeholder coming and relating. If you just focus on the ISO 26,000, it's maybe more than 5 or 6 category of stakeholders. So actually, it's quite interesting to analyze that stakeholders are source of advice, that it's important to have a big reflection with all the stakeholders to understand the need, etc. At the international level, it's quite interesting also because it depends on your organization, but if you have subsidiaries, different context, different organizations, so the practice is not the same. Concerning decision, you can adjust in your decision, strategic foresight. Maybe it's kind of negotiation, sharing communication, sharing repositioning, focusing on some problem, etc. So it's a real tool for decision and especially for learning also. You learn a methodology, an expertise, efficiency. It's good for education, change quality, etc. So many stuff about that. So my resource question today is how the use of strategic foresight affects the ability to open on responsible management. So to translate CSR strategy into practice and to maybe think about power that future are not non-based on power struggle. So actually, I analyze this. I had a qualitative methodology. It's much more based on discourse analysis and observation. It's a qualitative approach, non-quantitative. And I have some experience with French-speaking students in Switzerland, in France since 2016. And I use the Lipsor Canva and this tool from the research chair of Philippe Durance on prospective and development durable. So there is a methodology. You work on five workshops. The first workshop, it's about stereotype. After, you have to rethink about change and inertia, because we speak a lot of change, but we need to speak also of inertia. After, you have a scenario, a storytelling, so you have to explain 3 scenarios, the normative scenario, the disruptive scenario, and the training scenario. And after that, it's not finished, because in each scenario, you have to include a matrix about who are the stakeholders, and also to build the skills tree. So it's quite interesting and a nice exercise to do. And what are actually the results we have from this experimentation? So first, we need curiosity about the stakeholder, but to be curious, it's uncertain, it's risky, and we discuss about anxiety also, statu quo, etc. Sometimes, if you follow the change process of Lewin, when you disrupt a statu quo, after you have some guilty and anxiety for human, so it's quite difficult also to make that change. But what they do, it's much more easy to focus on legal issue, on traditional use of strategy, but at the same time you deal with that. The paradox is that your stakeholders are source of advice. They are focused on territory, they have the weak signal, and they are very relevant to think about futures and scenario. And actually, Philippe Durance and Michel Godet, that practicing strategic foresight is a personal reflection. Even if you are a big director or only an employee in the company, and that is important to deal with talent, and not only skill, but talent. What you love to do is not only a question of know-how, but a question of love-how. And collective intelligence, flexibility, it is for developing long-lasting and collective value, because it's a focus on talent of people. It's also changing the perception of risk. You perceive risk as an opportunity. You say, okay, decision is naturally collective. Even if I'm at the end, I make the decision, all the information I have in decision is an unconscious selective process, and it's naturally collective. You never deal without that, so it's collective decision. You have to consider a systemic context to know who are your stakeholders, whom, for whom, and why. How they dispatch during time, over time, etc. You need to develop communication, dialogue with them, to adjust also your trajectory, etc. And sometimes you need to clarify your skill and expertise with what you really want to do. So individual preferences are really important to analyze, even if you are an expert, and even if you have skills about this exercise. So we also have some good exercise of crowdsourcing and valuing stakeholder. So the digital is really interesting. So for example, with my colleague Thomas Gauthier, we use a platform, it is Futurescaper. And Futurescaper helped to develop a participatory foresight, so analyze trend, etc. And the stage of creativity remain in the hypothesis you have, the script writing, and the pleasure you have when you discuss on your scenario and the hypothesis you develop. So maybe I finish with the discussion. So maybe a few minutes about awareness, philosophy, and letting go. So actually, making foresight, you never disclose your strategic intention. So it's a positive argument for companies that say, okay, you can deal with your competitor, you can discuss with your stakeholder, client, supplier, etc. You never disclose your strategic intention. It avoids this risk. You also to discuss about the question of power and mistrust also. So it's important also to debate that at the beginning of the exercise. It's also an innovative learning method, and you have to focus on the facilitator, the animation of strategic foresight, to make meaning in action, to develop resiliency, mindfulness, and advances. So it's a question of encompassing the system and working on perception, meaning, projection, etc., to preserve manager from the very focus on power. So sometime when you discuss with Philippe Durance, he says that actually mindfulness arises from attention and disappear with inattention. So it's quite interesting also to know what is really done with your attention and what is what's done without your attention. You are not in bed conscious of what's happened. And actually, the need for philosophy, so it's a Dr. Stéphane Gillet. He says, so Lemoine says that ends are always intermediaries, and there is a need to transmit the ability of prospectivists to all the participants, so a kind of chain of value. Just you facilitate, and after your participant facilitate too, and they facilitate with their own stakeholder, etc. So it's a kind of transmission between your ability to all the participants that became after facilitator. And so it's a philosophy. So yeah, actually in management in business school, we already have some question about philosophy. It's, we have a master degree that combines philosophy and management. And there are 6 questions. It's about magnanimity, it's your generosity and vision, your humility to keep a sense of proportion, prudence, that don't mean mistrust, it's only prudence. Courage is not to be a kamikaze. Justice is ensuring fairness within a team. And also temperance, it's a question of self-control also, because when you develop your hypothesis, you have also to temper what's happened, and a kind of empathy also when developing this kind of scenario with your stakeholder. So I just conclude with that. So practicing strategic foresight, it's a proof to CSR strategizing. So it's responsible management. You take around the table all your stakeholder, you dispatch the power, etc. And it's a proof for companies that want to develop responsible management. You have to define action, decision making, intention, etc. And it's a question of actually, the script are not the most important. What is important, it is the script reading and the introspection people have when they do foresight. And after, there are some limits in this research that because it's an exploratory status, we have no co-construction with the participants, so we have to develop more analysis of practice to just observe this result, if it's true or not. And it's also depending of your own the politic of your own institution and the philosophy, how you consider question of responsible management or power or stakeholder, etc. What is your own institution? Because your own institution focus on specific tool, and after the result can depend when you have transversal vision of the exercise. So I just give you some references. So in the paper you have all the references. So here you have what we say. And thank you for your attention. And if you have any question, you're welcome.
Thank you, Sylvaine. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry that I had to push
Yeah,
you,
no,
but
no.
we have to leave the room here at 10 minutes
I
to
understand.
6, so
No,
I'm
it's
sorry.
okay. No problem.
And the group before was late. So if there are any questions for Sylvaine, and as you have seen, this was a big coming back to the ground from what Mouchon was saying, which was very philosophical almost and design oriented. So are there questions for Sylvaine? Yes.
Well, I guess what is the experience of any of you in terms of deciding what are the stakeholders or the sectors of society or whatever, the people that you would target first if you want to bring about a particular change project? I mean, maybe it depends on the subject too, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that's part of the process.
Yeah, maybe you can answer.
Excuse me, I would say give Sylvaine the floor because she has her, has some time.
Actually, yeah, it depends of the context you have, etc. But what is important that in business, when you start to consider your stakeholder, you need to consider the impact of your action, of your decision on the other stakeholders. So it's a kind of chain. And actually, sometimes you say, okay, I have a representative of this stakeholder, etc., but maybe he don't have all the information. I remember Roberto Poli says that we need to empower people to give them a margin of power just to explain and how they feel, etc. So to give a kind of collective possibility. Everybody can add an argument, but they need to know the practice, they need to know the exercise, they need to practice, and there is a need also for transmission of the method. Do you want to add something?
So I specifically in the workshop that we did around issues of transportation, there was many different stakeholders in the room, both from local government, central government, NGOs, business, and so on. And I think the question about who to turn to first is actually another thing to find out through getting these people in the room. So we got them in the room, and we found opportunities through, in my case, through the friction mapping, that they realized that the friction that they need to work on together, and they managed to define it together also towards what kind of futures that does it block, or does it what kind of new flows can it support?
Different sectors might be able to move forward faster than others, so that within any organization there may be things that could move forward and other resistance both that you have to deal with. Yeah.
It was focused on specific workshops, right? Yeah. It was not going out into society and then think, okay, who is the innovator, who is the laggard, who is the early adapters, and what you were mentioning. Yeah, it's a different view on things. So, thank you. Are there any other questions? Not so far. Okay. Well, it's late in the day. We had a long day. So I thank you again for your patience. And I thank you and Mouchon and, of course, Katrina for your presentations. Thank you very much. Thank you.